Hey everyone, welcome back to Listen for Real. I am really excited. This week, I chose a different guest. It is my friend Julie Gohring, a new friend actually. And how do we differ? Well, I would say that Julie is this beautiful example of a feminist. And I say that because if you saw where I stood on feminism and even using that word, I actually thought it was a negative or bad word. I thought it was anti-male. I thought it was totally, you're on the outskirts. I likened it to, oh, if you were a feminist, you were just like this screaming, ranting, shrieking, not attractive woman. I don't know where I got that mindset, but in my little echo chamber, that's what I envisioned. And then I meet someone like Julie and I realize, there is so much I don't know. So we're going to come back and you're going to get some a good little ear hustle listening in on our conversation about everything under the sun from, well, I'll let you know. You're going to be surprised, but everything under the sun. Feminism, patriarchy, you name it, we're going to talk about it. So join us in just a second. All right, here we go. Julie, I'm so happy you're with me today. Thank you for joining the Listen for Real audience. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so glad to be here too, Jen. We're in person. This is so fun.
Yeah, this is fun. You guys, you got to understand, Julie lives in Costa Rica, happens to be in California this week. And so we took this opportunity to record a conversation. And this is not the first. Julie is someone I met a few years ago, just to give you a little bit of our origin story. And it was through Women Speak that we connected. And for some strange reason, which I don't believe to be coincidence, I asked Julie about mansplaining during a phone call. It was the most random thing ever. And what was going on was I was actually hired by a company to do some communication workshops, which isn't out of the ordinary, but they had expressed an interest in me talking about mansplaining. And I really believed it was a non-thing, kind of like, well, maybe somebody, if they're being mansplained to, well, maybe they kind of had it. I almost want to, it's like vinegar in my mouth saying this, but maybe they had it coming. Like maybe they needed to, I don't know. Bottom line is I clearly had that perspective and Julie picked up on it. And she said, I really want to encourage you. Do you remember this?
Yes.
I really implore you to do a little more research before going in and doing a workshop on mansplaining. And I mean, tell them what you were thinking.
So funny. Well, I was thinking for sure, how is she going to give a talk on something she doesn't even believe exists?
Totally.
I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had just met and, I felt in that moment you had asked me for a reason. And so I just thought, well, if I can at least get some time here and get Jen some information, maybe, there's a way to open her up to seeing this, because maybe she hasn't had the direct experience herself, or if she has, maybe she hasn't recognized it as that. Because I think oftentimes, we're born into this world and into our life and these systems that oversee our life, and they just become normal. It's how it is. Yeah. And so we're not necessarily aware or tuned in to that. Maybe that could be a different way, or maybe that's not actually like great or right, And so, my hope was just I was like, who are you going to be giving this talk to, is it women? Is it men? And you were like, it's a combination. And I was like, are you sure you want to give this talk?
You did. Well, and let's give them some background a little bit as how I think I knew I was safe to ask you this question. And would you give a little background about you and your where you came from, what you do now? And I think that'll help make sense to everyone else. Oh, okay. You weren't just some random woman I was asking about mansplaining, but she actually commands a little authority, and she has done her research and homework and has gone on what I would say is a very it's inspired me. She has gone on a journey to educate herself, to dig deeper, to not just believe the pablum that was spoon-fed to her, but ask hard questions, engage in civil discourse, and listen deeply to other people's stories and experiences. And so I knew I was asking someone who, clearly exhibited some compassion. She could have tossed me that day, and I wouldn't have blamed. How many of us have heard someone and went, oh boy, we're not on the same page at all. And so, okay, well, it was nice to meet them, but that's not who I'm going to choose to spend my time around. Somehow Julie saw something in me and went, I'm not going to just leave this woman hanging. I think I could have some influence here in a really positive way. And she did not toss me out, even though I was saying things that were pretty discouraging. But tell them a little bit about you really quick, so they have a frame of reference of the things I know.
Sure. Well, that was a lot for you to put together at our first conversation, but you're obviously very, very,
very astute
and astute. Yeah. So yeah, for the context of our conversation, I think it's important just to share, a little bit about me. I would say that, today I'm progressive and I care deeply about human rights and equality and justice for all peoples, and also dismantling systems of oppression that are harming most people on this planet. But I haven't always been this way or held these views. I was, raised in a Catholic conservative home. I went to private Catholic schools for the majority of my formative years, and that really, informed my worldview. And it was only, with time and a lot of extensive travel and experience and just meeting people outside of my world, outside of my bubble that look differently than me, believe things differently, maybe came from different cultures or whatever, that I started to realize not everyone on this planet is having the same experience as me.
Truth.
And that made me go, and it just opened me up. It expanded me in a way where I had more room to learn and hear and just listen to what other people had to say. And I think that is what, has allowed me over time to continue to just be open to knowing that, hey, I don't know everything. There's so much that I don't know. And the more that I know, the more I realize I don't know. Yeah. And so, I just think that's super important to remember, is that's what's kind of cool about life, is that we're always evolving and growing,
Yep. Well, and what you just reminded me of is the fact that there is a difference between experience and existence. And I can't take credit for this, that dichotomy, if you will. One of my TEDx speakers is an amazing man you will hear from. His name is Sean Smith. And he and I talk a lot about matters of race. And he said, we seem to think, I happen to be white, you happen to identify as white, and Sean does too, okay? And he said, just because we're not experiencing something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So I remember talking to you and going, okay, wait a minute. I feel like I can accomplish anything in this life. There is no glass ceiling for me. I feel like the world is my oyster and that nobody's stopping me. And that doesn't mean that doesn't exist for someone else and that they are being stopped and that there is a ceiling, especially women of color. that there is that intersectionality. That was another term you introduced to me that I'd never even heard the term intersectionality between gender equality and race. Correct me when I say things wrong, because I'm still learning, people. I'm still so learning. But I really just thought, oh, well, and he uses this example of, if I'm inside and I'm all warm and dry and my best buddy is outside and he happens to be black and he's like, it's raining. And I'm like, dude, I'm warm and dry in here. It's not raining. He's like, yeah, it's raining. I'm soaking wet out here. See the difference between your experience and does that deny the existence of something, right? So what was it? So it was the travel that was probably kind of the turning point for you, that you realized, I want to delve into this more. Because for me, it was talking to you and a few other things. I think I told you about, I got called out on Facebook. You know that whole story, right? And it was, I made a comment on Facebook on someone else's page. They had made a post about relating the use of tear gas at the southern border to the gas chambers in Nazi Germany. And I made a response to say, whoa, I think that's a bridge too far. Like, come on, the extermination of an entire race of people compared to crowd control at our southern border. And they were like, oh my gosh, Jen, this is how it starts. And they ripped me apart. And I was so staunch and so digging in my heels and supporting my narrative and going to find everything I could find to support my narrative, as we do, right? And so I'd say that was the little piece that showed me that I didn't know everything, and that my perspective or the certain news channel that I watched at that time was not the only right perspective. And so that was the start of it. But then it was conversations with you and others that you said, hey, check out this person. You'd send me emails. You'd send me the Medium article you sent me a while back was amazing. It never even occurred to me. The things that were mentioned in that article never even occurred to me ever, not once. So what, will you share some of the stories that just got you to this place?
Yeah. So I think travel was definitely something that has opened me up a lot. And I started traveling internationally really young. I went to Europe, but then I also went to Southeast Asia. I've been to Kenya. I've been all over Central America and places in South America. And yeah, that just, opens you up to seeing how there are people on this planet that are like you as human beings, but they have different cultures and different, ways of being. But I would have to say that really what took me to a whole other level was the election of Donald Trump. That was something that was really hard for me to understand. The pussy grabber. 56% of white women voted for him in that first election. The guy that is the pussy grabber, the guy that has, and so I didn't understand how this person who had been so vulgar, and I mean, it's documented how he was just lying all the time and making things up. I just couldn't understand it. And so I really went down the rabbit hole of trying to understand. And, you got to go back in the history of the United States and understand how different movements have come to what they are. And there's no way to get around not understanding race if you do that. And, I grew up just like you here in California. And California, I think is, I'm not saying racism doesn't exist in California. It absolutely does. But, it is looked down upon, where if you go to some states in the South, it's a very different message around racism. So, yeah, I had Black friends and friends of color and, those kinds of people in my life, but I didn't really understand my perspective as a white woman and, some of the unearned privileges that I had because of that. And I hadn't done too much of a deep dive into unconscious bias and what those are like. I think, to be really honest, I remember growing up and watching the news, and the people that were the murderers, the people that were the burglars, the people that were going to harm me were Black men. That's what was shown on the news, right? And so that becomes an unconscious bias, right?
Right.
And so, there's all these different biases that we are forming all the time. And I don't think anyone gets through life without them, but an awareness of them is really important. And so anyway, the election of Donald Trump really took me down that rabbit hole. I started learning from Black women who, they've never had the luxury to not think about racism. These women have sons that are being murdered in our country, like an average African-American mom, main worry. And I even actually talked to one on the plane coming here. She has 3 boys, and she's always scared for her boys when they're walking around because they could just be shot for existing, and this is a real reality for them. Something that, I asked my mom, she never was worried that my brother was going to get shot, So
I'm a mom of a 17-year-old boy who wears a hoodie, who drives around, who listens to music. He does all the things any of those boys do. And I've never once worried about his safety from that standpoint. Yeah. As you said that, I asked myself, I've never thought that.
Yeah.
Not once.
I remember a close friend of mine who's African-American, and he was telling me that, he lives in Texas, but that doesn't really matter. But he says that he puts his driver's license in the visor of,
oh my gosh,
like the visor, of
his
above
car.
him, because if he has to move to pull around to grab his wallet to show his license, they might think he's going for a gun and shoot him. So he has it right there and he pulls it down. And that's just a safety precaution. I never have even thought about that. Never thought about, I would pull my purse out from underneath my seat or whatever. I would never even think someone would think I would have a gun, So it just really opens me up and my heart to wow, someone is really having a different experience than I am,
Yeah. Yeah. That leads me to think about something else that is that different experience, and it's patriarchy. I thought, so before meeting you, I really thought that patriarchy was something conspiracy theorists talked about. It was with the Freemasons, the Illuminati. You guys, I'm always going to open the kimono and be honest, and it's embarrassing, and you just have to love me anyway. Okay. This is how we roll, people, but I'm going to be honest. So I really did think that I didn't even know what that really meant. I didn't understand it. And so you explained a little bit more. So it's again, like you said in your intro, I love that you said, I'm not just a feminist and it's all about women and up with women and down with everyone else and that you're anti-man. No, you very much appreciate men. You have men in your life very significantly. And so do I. But this is a whole different, feminism is about dismantling in a lot of ways systems, and patriarchy is one. Will you just talk a little more about that? Because I look back and I would honestly say, I think I defended and protected it actually as a woman in my privilege because of my Christian underpinnings. I wouldn't say I grew up in a more liberal progressive home, actually, even though I share your commonality of raised in Catholic schools my whole life. I definitely was in a more progressive minded Catholic school system. But how is it I am a 50-year-old woman. How have I gone this far and learned in the last few years about patriarchy?
Well, I mean, I feel like those terms, feminist, patriarchy, they are loaded terms. And unfortunately, politics have politicized them in such a way that people can't even have a conversation about what are we actually talking about here?
Yeah.
Because I think if you say the word patriarchy, someone's like, oh, you're a lefty, right?
Totally.
Or if you say feminist, you're like this radical, angry man hater, right? These are these stereotypes. And, and I hate to say it, but, the right is perpetuating them because, it helps their narrative. And so we need new terms, first of all, to be able to talk about this. But I think what everyone needs to understand, and this is just like historical fact about, like, we're calling it the patriarchy, but I know for a lot of people that's an uncomfortable term, but it is a historical fact that for the last 2,000 years or so, the feminine, and I'm talking about the feminine characteristics, the things we deem as feminine, like being caring, being nurturing, being emotional, right? Being sensitive. Those qualities exist in all people, but they have been squashed in the patriarchy. And so the conditioning around them and is different in men and women, but it is squashed, right? And so we are living in a male dominated world where we only really get access to one half of ourselves. Well, at least men aren't allowed to be emotional or sensitive. I mean, I'm talking in generalities, but the culture is like, you're weak if you express that, right? And for women, it's a little bit more complicated because, we're supposed to just be in our feminine, be sensitive and gentle and all those things. But if we exhibit a more masculine quality, we're called bossy or selfish or bitchy, where a man would be looked at as strong. And so it's just, the patriarchy is simply the squashing of the feminine for everyone. And it doesn't just harm women, it harms men too. That's the thing. Men die younger than women because in this system, men don't go to the doctors. They're told to toughen up, right? And so that hurts them. They don't get the full expression of who they are because they're not supposed to show certain characteristics. And it goes on and on. So it's really for, the movement, like a feminist movement is really for equality and justice for all, full expression, regardless, like both being able to be all of who you are, no matter what you look like, how you identify, all of the things. That's really what feminism is today. Now it's evolved, right? And it's been, in my opinion, always unfairly portrayed by the right as like this crazy, man-hating. Oh, and you're angry. Only about abortion. That's the other thing they'll paint. Feminists are all about abortion, and that's the only thing that matters to them. That isn't accurate either. Not even close. Yeah. Like there's many issues that matter, but that would be another way they paint it, is that it's about one issue, that feminists are just that myopic, that they're going to choose one issue and stand on one issue. And I don't believe that to be the case too. Do you? Feminism, like I said, is for the equality and justice for all. Yeah. However, that is a very important issue because it's about a woman having full sovereignty over her own body and not being told by someone else what to do. I personally think women should be able to do whatever the fuck they want to do. And if you decide that you don't believe in abortion, that's your personal choice. Totally. But let's not superimpose that on someone else. Why do you think you know what's better for another woman? Let's allow each woman to make the best decision for herself. And I think that's what the movement is all about, and what's ironic is a lot of women that, vote against having this sovereignty of their own body. They also believe that they should have full rights to do whatever, freedom and do whatever they want to do. Why then are they trying to take that away from someone else?
Right. Well, and to your point about it's a movement for all human beings to express. So it's not just about women, and all people should have sovereignty over their own body. So the abortion issue is definitely one that highlights that and underscores that point. But think about it from do we support people in the healthcare they want, the vaccines they choose to get or not get, the things they do with their body, whether they're male or female, whether they identify something in between, that they get to choose and have sovereignty over their own body. And as I understand this more and more, a true feminist, and guys, did you know this too? Guess what Jen learned? Did you know there are men who are feminists because they believe, like, I didn't know that. See, I'm just outing everything, because I promise you there are people who are listening going, oh my gosh, Jenna, me too. I did not know this. There are men who are feminists because it's about an entire perspective. It isn't just I'm rallying only for one specific cause. And that's what I really appreciate. And it's about human dignity and anyone who identifies as a human and it is given sovereignty over their choices and who they are and the life they choose to pursue, and that we're a stand for that person.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick break and then come back and hit it a little more. Oh, I love this. Thank you for being here. We are back. Oh, I'm so glad you have joined us. We are so curious. What are your thoughts? We want this conversation to go beyond this room between the two of us. And if you're resonating or you're going, I disagree or I don't understand, touch base with us on Instagram. You know mine, but I'll give it to you again. It's Being Real Jen. And Julie's is Selling is Feminine. And I really want to talk about self-introspection. And maybe you all be thinking too, how have you stopped, taken that pause and taken a look at yourself and what do you wrestle with and what do you struggle with this? For me, it was definitely the misogyny of this that kind of swims through all of this, right? Will you talk a little more? Because when we were on break, you talked about something that I thought, oh gosh, yes, we've got to share this because I know this has been major breakthrough for me. I've definitely been on the wrong side of this. Will you talk about what misogyny is and your perspective on it? Because I thought that was so golden.
Yeah, sure. So misogyny, I always thought was such a strong word until I really understood misogyny, but it's a deep hatred for the feminine or for women. And that is part of how the patriarchy works and how it continues to squash the feminine in all of us. And it's perpetuated, and largely lots of it is by women that don't even realize it. And that was one of the things that I had, like, one of many things of just like realizing what lives inside of me. And, growing up, I kind of, sometimes felt like I could connect more with guys than girls, or, I was just like, oh, I don't want to be around those girls. They're like this,
Mm-hmm.
And just like, if you tend to be really judgmental of other women, or you want to press upon what you think is right for them, all of these things are like important for you to reflect upon and look at, because they're usually symptoms of some internalized misogyny from this culture that lives inside of you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, we have to remember we're kind of surrounded by a whole ethos, and it's insidious the way it plants itself in our psyche and in our behaviors and in our reactions. And I know I've definitely done that. There have been multiple times I can remember saying that I was anti something because I felt like it was against men and that I had to go and defend men. And there are times that is important and appropriate. But I don't think I'm explaining this very well, but
that's also a sign right there.
What?
For misogyny is when, well, it depends the exact context, but when your first like inclination is to side with your husband or your son over another woman or girl, especially if it's around something like with their safety, or this is a big thing in the very basis of how we have a rape culture. All of this stuff comes from that place and grows.
Okay, but wait, this is what I struggle with. Because sometimes it is a righteous thing to do that, to side with someone who maybe didn't do something wrong. So how do you determine that you're acting out of this misogynistic influence versus, no, I'm righteously going to defend my son who, because he's a good heart and a good guy and he didn't do something wrong. And this just happens to be a female who's calling it out. Do you see what I'm saying?
Sure.
Sometimes it is a righteous defense. And other times, and believe me, I've definitely been on the side where, no, I just knew that my place was to always stand and in full-throated support of my husband. Mm-hmm. That was definitely the case in my first marriage. You stand in full-throated support of your husband, whether he's right or wrong.
Where did you learn that?
I know.
You were taught to be a good wife. That comes from religion.
Yeah, no, that came from religion because that didn't come from my family of origin. Right. My mom would have no problem calling out my dad.
Yeah.
But you're right.
Swimming. It's it's outwardly told in most religions where your place is and who you are to sort of serve, right?
That just hit me. Do you know I used to ask my first husband how to vote? Oh my God, that just made my stomach get sick. Your face. Oh my gosh, Julie's face, you guys. It just hit me. It just occurred to me right now as you said that. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's an awkward moment. Deep breath, everyone. Everyone take a knee.
Well, you know what? I think there are probably, it's very courageous for you to share that. And you are not alone. There are plenty of other women that I'm sure ask their husbands who to vote for.
Yeah.
And fall in line, which is,
you know what? And I think honestly, though, can I be honest?
Yeah.
It was not because he demanded that of me or that he felt I had to vote the way he voted. Although he definitely probably would have told me he thought I was wrong if I was, but in his mind, I was lazy. You know what? I think the patriarchal mindset also can capitalize on someone being lazy. Do you know what I'm saying? It was easier to just let him make all the decisions. I didn't want to have to think about that stuff, which is really, really now makes me sad to think of the women who fought to vote, the people who want to voice themselves and what they want to see in the world. And that shows up oftentimes in how they vote. And that I was willing to just abdicate that just because I was lazy. That's a whole different podcast. Abdicating our responsibility out of pure and lazy comes from privilege. Okay, so think about that. I have the privilege to just not really care all that much because my life's pretty damn good. And I don't need legislation all that much as a white cisgendered woman, do I?
You brought up some good points in there. Some really good points. I think what makes this story like a beautiful example of you perpetuating these systems of oppression in yourself is yes. Like, I don't know if I would call you lazy. I know you now, and you're not a lazy person. I think that you were really bred to believe that maybe even the political, business, financial world wasn't even your world, right? And so you just look to your husband because you're not a lazy person. So if you just ignored that subject forever, it was probably because you didn't think that's where you were supposed to be, which is perpetuating your own oppression and not being able to have full expression and sovereignty over your life and what you do. So I see it like that. But then you brought up another good point, and that is, your unearned position in the hierarchical structure that exists in the world and in the United States, right? And so at the end of the day, you weren't thinking of the history of what you weren't thinking of the history of what it took for women to even get the vote. But, something that I've learned from traveling is that there are so many places in the world that don't even have a democracy where people can't vote, and women certainly can't vote. And so it's like, why would you give up that opportunity to have your voice heard? Because the thing is other people are depending on you too.
They are. And in fact, I am so happy you said that, because we are on the same wavelength right now, is that we have a responsibility wherever we are, whoever we are, especially as women. But I'm just thinking about the shifts that have occurred in Afghanistan in the last several months. And with the shift in the Taliban taking power so quickly. And I remember reading this beautiful story from this woman who went, I suddenly have to hide my degrees. I have to hide my everything that all of my ambitions, my dreams could put me at risk. And I thought of all of the women and girls who are suddenly being silenced, who had in one day their dreams taken away. We have no understanding of that here. None. That in an instant, their safety, their sovereignty, their ability to even voice their story, their wants, their needs, their desires, and can be removed right here. This is 2021. Like, this is right now. And so we have a responsibility to give voice to these topics. We need to flesh this stuff out. We need to screw up and make mistakes and just own our stuff and go, okay, what can I learn? Because maybe they don't have a voice right now. And hopefully by speaking and then amplifying and elevating the voices around us as well, we will make room that can create change and maybe be the voice for them right now while they don't have one. I don't know. I feel that so deeply that we can't possibly comprehend what that must be like. And so, gosh, let's use our voices. Let's sit and feel foolish and ask questions and go back and forth and engage with one another as you and I are, because they can't. A lot of them. There are women in the world right now who simply can't. They will be murdered. They will be atrocities are committed because they just want to speak and be free and have sovereignty. It's just not an option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're really fortunate in the United States, and there are many Western countries where women, aren't necessarily in full equality with men, but certainly not in a situation like that. And I think that's one of the things, United States is such a large country, and oftentimes people don't really travel outside of it, or maybe they just go to Mexico or Europe once, or Hawaii. And it's like getting out, which I did a lot of, really helped me to see, like, wow, I could have been born anywhere in the world, right? I could have been born in in Afghanistan. I could have been born in Iraq. I could have been born like in a podunk town somewhere in Namibia, like anywhere. And I could have been born any color of skin. And unfortunately, there's a hierarchical system putting like importance on that. And, I could have been born into a family that, like had no money at all and didn't believe in education and, like there's so many things that I realized that I didn't like, I just was born, right? And I like sort of got a set of external circumstances that has given me, like a different experience in this life. And when I realized like I didn't earn that. It's just what happened. Right. And other people that are in a different situation didn't earn that either. And so I'm like, how can I use what I've got that someone else doesn't in a way that's a positive contribution forward to make it better for other people? Because I mean, this wasn't earned and that wasn't earned for them either. And so, as women, it's so important for us, if we really want to heal, is to stick up for our sisters all over the planet and help them.
Well, and that's why, okay, so shameless plug to both of our businesses. And here's why. Because, and why I want to collaborate with you so much is I'm all about bringing voice, elevating, amplifying voices that need to be heard, right? And I especially focus on women's voices. And I want to do that all around the world. And you believe in economic empowerment in so many. Will you talk for a second too? Because I think it really speaks to your ethos, your values that we've been talking about this whole time. You've literally created a business model and curriculum that I think needs to be mentioned. Now that I think about all of this, it all fits hand in glove. And it is about empowering people, no matter who they are. So talk a little bit about that really quick, because I think that's really important as we wrap up, is what are we doing to move forward? How can we come together, whether it's Julie and I coming together or it's all of us with whatever's in our hands coming together to move things forward for everybody,
Well, I feel like we are in a moment right now, a moment as a population on the planet of remembering all of who we are. And that includes our feminine side, right? And I think there's a real call for that within women and in general. And, the environment is showing us that the way we're living is not sustainable. And even technology, while it's done a lot of positive things for us, and got us connected and, more women are getting online and in business, it's also has another side to it where people don't feel as connected to others. And then also this pandemic, right? And so there's a real calling. I say like the intelligence of the planet and the market economy is calling forth the feminine. When I'm saying the feminine,
I love that.
I'm talking about just connection and deep care and listening to each other and having empathy and understanding and wanting to be collaborative and consensual. And so, I really feel like, if we are going to move forward on this planet, human beings, we have got to find a way to do it together and differently than we've been doing it, because climate change is showing us, and so part of my work is, and I can talk about this stuff forever, but I really want to see women's voices rise just like you and help them get their work out into the world and help them launch their businesses. I think economic empowerment is so important for women because so many women feel vulnerable in situations because we're paid less. That's just a fact.
It's a fact.
We, in most situations, take care of the children if we're not like still married or with the father. And so having enough money to just feel secure is difficult. Like that's not how our society has been built. 125 years ago, women were property. We weren't even able to own land or work. So economic empowerment is so important for women to feel safe and to secure and get their voices out into the world. And it's an exciting time. Women are starting their own businesses and they're bringing forth their gifts in beautiful ways. And part of business, actually, I think business and selling is one of the same, because you cannot have a business without selling. And selling is just simply the exchange, right? Someone is offering their gift, their value, their service, their offering, and someone is going to receive that and give you something back. And usually that's money. That's what we've agreed upon. And for many women, because of this patriarchal society that we live in, the story around selling has been this masculine-based, aggressive, like combative, exploitative. You have to convince someone to do something that they don't want to do. Yeah. Someone wins and someone loses, right? And most women don't want to participate in that at all, especially like a heart-centered entrepreneur, a woman who really just wants to help their client or whatever it is they're getting out into the world. And on top of it, women aren't allowed to act that way because, like I had mentioned earlier, if you exhibit masculine qualities, you're looked at as selfish or pushy or bossy. And so anyway, what I'm really empowering women around is feminine heart-based selling, which is what I've been doing my entire life and didn't even realize it until, I don't know, the last so many years when I decided to birth this into my Feminine Selling Academy where I teach this. But the most successful selling, which is the most successful way to do business, is always centering and serving your client or your potential client and putting their needs at the center and coming from your heart and coming from that place of wanting to help where it's a win-win for both.
Yes.
And so I feel like, very long story, but empowering women with this approach to selling will help them get comfortable with it, feel aligned with it, and have really successful businesses that will bring them abundance and fulfillment and the economic empowerment and security that they need.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. I love that. I love that. I love that. I keep dreaming about collaborations and I just see them. I know they're in our future.
Me too.
I know they
100%.
I'm so glad you were here. Thank you. Thank you again, my friends. I love you. You know I do. And you know that I believe so wholeheartedly in real conversations and just digging through things. And if some of this made you bristle, please know I get that. And that isn't bad or wrong. It just is. And don't hesitate to just dig in and explore a little and go find other experiences and opinions that are outside of your own echo chamber. If I had just remained in where I sat in my comfortable little spot, I would have missed so much. I would have missed a Julie Gohring in my life, to be honest. I would have missed knowing and empowering other women that I now have the positioning and influence to do in these beautiful settings that are super supportive. I would have missed all of that. I totally would have missed it. And that makes me sad to consider. So I hope and pray that every conversation you hear on this podcast is just something that expands that paradigm so that we can shift where necessary. It's so important as we love on each other and just love our fellow human beings. It's just, there's nothing more important, really. So thank you, Julie.
It's been so fun to be here.
It's been awesome.
The Listen for Real podcast is recorded in Rockland, California, and is edited by Jamie Hill and Christian Oliver. Our theme music is Zero by the amazing Shannon Curtis. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next episode.